in response to some suggestions yesterday to run the class until 11 today and tomorrow, since we have so much to cover. And I think that one of the ways we can help the rabbi do that is to be conscious of hand raising and questions. Everything she says is so fascinating. It raises a million comments and questions, but let's perhaps even more than usual, let her guide us through this so that we get through all of those Psalms. And then we will start. We have Cantor Nimi with us, who is going to be singing us in again with a different version, I believe, of Lechuna Ranana. Whoops. Cantor, are you ready?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. I'm using in my office space, which I'm not used to doing things on Zoom from here, actually. Usually I'm used to doing things from home. So I hope that sound works and all of that.
You're great. We got you.
Great. So just this setting that I'm going to share actually is by a member of the prayer group Nava Tehillah. Her name is Yael Tai. She's one of my favorite songwriters in that prayer collective, and we're just going to be looking at a setting of the first two verses. So just through Bizmirot Narielo, she goes on into the next phrase of verse 3. Since we're going till 11 o'clock today, perhaps Harold, I think that was among the links that I sent you was her recording. Maybe we can hear her actually offer this same melody.
We will do that as our outro.
Wonderful. All right. So this is at least the first two sections of her Lechuna Ranana. Very different feeling. I should turn on my original sound. There we go. Lechuna Ranana Lavaya Naria Netzur Hish'einu Ranena lavaya naria letzur yisheinu nekadma fanav betoda bizmirot naria lo nekadma fanav Toda Bizmiro Nari Alo Lechune Ranena Lavaya Nari Aletzur Hish'einu Lechune Ranena
Thank you. Rabbi, it's all yours.
Beautiful. What a great choice, Jacob. I feel like I say that all the time. And yes, like beautifully counterposed in the way that these Psalms can be extremely celebratory and raucous, or thoughtful and meditative. The language within them is so beautiful and so wide ranging that it allows for all of these different musical interpretations that captures the emotive range of the listener, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. We are going to go till 11. If you can't stay till 11, Bli Neder, you didn't make a vow to do that, so nobody is going to take offense if you've got to go. We are going to be studying these Psalms in a different sort of methodology than what the class is typically used to. We're not going to go so much one by one, line by line. We are looking at these Psalms as a rubric. So we're going to tackle the 95 through 99 set, I don't really expect us to get through all of them today, but we're going to read the whole psalm in Hebrew, the whole psalm in English, and look for these consonant themes that arc across all of these psalms, binding them together into one composite whole. Whatever we don't get to today, we'll also do tomorrow. We'll do Psalm 29 and 92 tomorrow as well, by God's grace. And listen, worse comes to worse comes to worse. Maybe we have to study together a day next week. It would not so break my heart. I love spending time with you. So that is not my goal, but please don't stress out about our ability to cover all of these psalms in their beauty and richness, and yet also only scratch the surface. So a couple of very important starting points. Number one, does everybody have a CBST Siddur? If you do not have a CBST Siddur, the two things I want you to know are, this is where you buy the Siddur. The link is in the chat. And if I could ask Bruce to reshare that periodically, how do you buy the CBST Siddur? Link is in the chat. Additionally, there are two pricing tiers for it. Number one is buy yourself a Siddur. Number two is buy a Siddur for yourself and for somebody who can't afford one. If you are a CBST member who wants and needs the Siddur and can't pay that ticket price, don't even worry about it. Email info@cbst.org, and we are sending Siddurim to members literally all over the country, all over the world. The other link I want you to have is, if you don't have the CBST Siddur today, here is the link to its PDF. This PDF is somewhat abbreviated. It's only got the Hebrew and the transliteration. We will share the English translations as we go through. If you've got the Siddur literally in front of you, I'm going to be calling page numbers. You can see that with the Psalms for Kabbalat Shabbat, Hebrew on one side, English on the facing side. But what I'm going to be sharing for all of us to look at on the screen is just the Hebrew. And the last thing I wanted to share is, if you are interested, and I should put this up in the Facebook group, and I will when I remember to do it, a little bit more about, how did Kabbalat Shabbat as a rubric come about? What was more of its origin story than we got to talk about yesterday. Here's a great short article about it from the Jewish Virtual Library, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful resource. There are tons of wonderful, aggregate pluralist sites out there for you to learn from. My Jewish Learning is another favorite of mine, but this is the one I found that focused most closely on Kabbalat Shabbat instead of Shabbat as an enormous concept. And that was really what we were talking about yesterday. So that's what I wanted you to have. The last invitation I would like to make is that the translations of the Psalms in this beautiful Siddur were largely a creation of a towering CBST member, Yehuda Berger, who his fingerprints are felt on so much of what we do at CBST today. Though he is no longer with us, I wanted to honor him and his gorgeous poetic translations of these Psalms as we study them. Any translation of these Psalms will work. You go to Sepharia, you pull out your Robert Alter. We love hearing the plurality of voices, but I am especially struck by the way that Yehuda translated these Psalms. And if anybody wants to share a memory of Yehuda or impressions of Yehuda in the chat, so those of us who were not as lucky to meet him as he lived can learn from his legacy and from his friends. I think that would be a beautiful way to honor him as we dive into this Psalm study. So we begin with page 52. And this is the beginning of our Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms rubric. Remind me, friends, when we're talking about the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, what Psalms are we talking about?
95.
Starting at 95, going through. Yep.
Just saying.
Yep. So that's where we start. We go 95 through 99 in chronological order. We sneak 92 and 93 in at the end. 92 is the Psalm for Shabbat, so that's why it gets a special placement. We had a mystery yesterday. It never occurred to me, why is Psalm 94 not in this rubric? Why are we going 92 through 99, but there is no place for Psalm 94. If you have that question too, I suggest you really quickly read Psalm 94. It's going to be apparent from the very first line. It is a vengeful, angry psalm, which is a perfectly valid way to enter Kabbalat Shabbat sometimes, is sometimes the way I enter Kabbalat Shabbat, but does not really match the narrative tone or the sort of feeling that we want to embrace as a community as we enter Shabbat. So any questions about why 94 is not in this rubric, read 94 and all will be made clear. What I would love is if I could have a volunteer to read the Hebrew of the Psalm all the way through, and then a volunteer who has the CBST Siddur to read the English translation all the way through. And here's what we're looking for, friends. There are a couple of these overarching themes that connect all of the Psalms. Number one is the theme of creation. We are reminded that there are 6 Psalms in the lead up to Kabbalat Shabbat, representing each of the 6 days of creation. And they are 29 is included in that 6. Just remember if the counting's getting confusing. So we're looking for themes of creation. We're looking for themes of God's majesty, truly God as sovereign, the creative force behind creation, the one with all of the power. And so God is viewed as ruler here, and it is repeated over and over again. Some scholars call these the royalty psalms because of the way that God is referred to. And finally, we're looking for awe-filled grandeur and appreciation. When we think about the different ways that the Psalms are narrated, these Psalms are particularly appreciative and grateful. So those are the general themes that we're looking for across all of these Psalms. Themes of creation, themes of God's majesty and rulership, and notes of appreciation. And that's what you should keep your ears perked for in the Hebrew or in the English. So I see some hands raised. Is there somebody who...
We have Ben Shafran unmuted and ready to go for the Hebrew.
All right, great. Let me share the screen so that Ben can see what he is reading. Friends, we are on page 52 in the Hebrew of our Siddur. Everybody seeing this nice and clear?
Yes.
Large Hebrew. For those who are still working on their Hebrew letters, transliteration is at the bottom of page 52, and then the English is on page 53. Ben, would you please?
לכו נרננה לאדוני, נריע לצור ישענו, נקדמה פניו בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו. כי אל גדול אדוני, ומלך גדול על כל אלוהים, אשר בידו מחקרי ארץ, וטורפות הרים לו, אשר לא הים והוא השר, ויבשת ידיו יצרו. בואו נשתחווה ונכרע, נברכה לפני אדוני עושנו, כי הוא אלוהינו ואנחנו עם מרעיתו וצאן ידו. היום אם בקולו תשמעו, אל תקשו לבבכם כמריבה, כי יום מסע במדבר, אשר ניסוני אבותיכם, בחנוני גם ראו פעלי. 40 שנה אקוד בדור, ואומר, עם טועה לבב הם, והם לא ידעו דרכי. אשר נשבעתי ואפי, אם יבואון אל מנוחתי.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Ben. Following along in the Hebrew, just like I would in a Torah portion with our digital yad right here, just in case I think the layout is beautiful, but if you weren't expecting to jump from column straight to the next column, wanted you to be able to keep your place in the Hebrew. Asterisks in the text indicate that this is a line that is commonly sung on its own or a part of a particular musical composition that we do a lot. So we wanted to be able to say at the asterisk. So I think that's all of sort of the formatting things one would need to know in the Hebrew itself. And I've got some volunteers to read the translation from the Siddur in English. Harold, who should
Yes,
read?
I think Sherry had her hand up first, if she was indeed volunteering.
Fabulous.
I was. Come, let us sing to the Eternal. Ring out praises to the rock of our rescue. Offer thanks. Ring out praises in joyous song. For you, Eternal, are great, greater than all would-be gods. Yours are the depth of the earth. Mountain peaks are yours alone. The sea is yours. You made it. The dry land was shaped by your hand. Come, let us worship and bend the knee. Let us raise the source of our being who made us. You are our God. We, the flock in your care. Today, if to your voice we would but listen, oh, that we harden not our hearts, as time and again in the wilderness, we challenged and tested you. We saw glimpses of you, but still felt uncertain. 40 years, a complete generation. You put up with us, resigning yourself to our limitations, taking us only as far as we could go, just to the edge of your place of rest, to but the threshold of your promised land. Today, if to your voice we would but listen. And can I just say that may Yehuda's memory continue to be for blessing.
Absolutely. And, you know, every time among millions of times that we read these Psalms, it truly is. So when Shari was reading, it doesn't do so well for me to follow like exactly word by word in an English translation of Hebrew text, because the syntax is different, especially in these gorgeous translations of the Psalms. It is highly metaphoric and sometimes interpretive rather than literal. So what I was doing was just kind of resting near each line as it was being read, so you could sort of keep track. One thing to notice is that the translator, Yehuda, repeated this line, if to your voice we would but listen, which is not literally in the Hebrew text, but I think is gorgeous and appropriate. What kinds of observations do we have about this psalm, especially on those themes that we laid out at the beginning? How does this psalm fit into Kabbalat Shabbat?
I see Jim Brulet's hand up. I don't know if he was volunteering to read. No, he does not have a question. Okay. So, Rabbi, if you could close your screen for a minute so I can
Absolutely.
see everybody.
Yes.
And I will look for hands shooting up. Hold on. I do not have a hand at the moment. I will ask, you use the term rubric, Rabbi. Could you define that for us, what a rubric is?
Absolutely. That's a good question. All questions are good questions, but you know. So rubric, when I use it, means a set and like a prescribed and defined set. So when I say the rubric of Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms, I mean these particular Psalms that all go together with this specified relationship in this context. They are not random, they were chosen on purpose, and they continue to exist sort of as a matched set.
Got it. Saul Zalkin.
So in answer to your question, Rabbi, the first third of the translation and the psalm deals with creation. God created the mountains, the sea, the dry land. And the second half is about us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not about creation itself. It's just how we weren't appreciative in the desert. We drove God crazy for 40 years until that generation died. And as Yehuda reminds us, the current generation is often not so much better.
Yep, we are our ancestors' children, that is to be sure. And so if you're looking, I'm going to share the Hebrew text once again to just point out a couple of the observations that Saul made. So Saul pointed out that the beginning of the psalm is the one that's really concerned with creation and God's role in creation so much. And you could kind of cut it off at this line that the formatters very wisely have sort of made stand alone, because it is the refrain in Yehuda's translation, if to your voice we would but listen. This is where the psalm sort of takes a narrative turn, starts talking about us as the Jewish people and our relationship with God, and especially appreciative of God's compassion and patience with us. Note also that this psalm is in the plural collective, Lechu neranana, come let all of us. And then you see this vav with a shuruk ending. The ball hits you in the stomach and you go, ooh. That is the symbol of the collective plural. So you see it in bo'u right here. All right, more hands. Harold, should I stop the share or?
I think if you stop the share, we'd be good. Jeffrey Weiss has his hand up.
Okay, well, I see the second part of it is very relevant. It reminds me, it's like talking about our struggles through the week. When I'm seeing the stuff here, like, where was I here? Oh, that we harden our hearts and time again in the wilderness, it sounds like, and we challenged and tested you. It sounds like all the struggles and the challenges we go through the week. So we won't be, so our humanity is being tested in other
Oh,
words.
I love that, Jeffrey. And what a great midrash about why this should be the first psalm. You know, you got to move from the feelings of the week into the feelings of Shabbat. Perfect.
Wow.
Who's next?
Judy Hollander.
I was thinking at the very end, it's like we are just taking one more step and we'll get into Shabbat, just at the edge of your place of rest. And I thought how fitting to be the first psalm. I mean, I did the same thing in the other psalms, but this is it's like we're taking that step.
Exactly. We're taking a step into the doorway, you know, like we're really appreciating this liminal space we talked about, the threshold. Like we aren't into Shabbat yet, but we're going into Shabbat and we can feel it. Beautiful.
Sherry Allen.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say that I live in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm a cantor at a small Reform congregation in Arlington. And my son and his partner met and attend CBST, which is how I, got associated. And he sent me the Siddur. And I have to say that, and this is a comment more on the English translations. Mm-hmm. I share these English translations often with my congregation because I find that they are so open and so so much better than the traditional third person. I notice here what I like about the English is that it's in the second person. You are great instead of the Lord is great. And also again the language is eternal, not or sovereign, not specifically gendered in that way. So that's what I really appreciate about the translations here in this particular Siddur are so accessible and not off-putting. And so I have to say that we use Siddur Hadash, but I rarely use any of the English translations from them. I love the translations that you have in this Siddur.
Thanks. And maybe there are people in this Zoom room who are deeply, intimately involved with the creation of this Siddur. The Psalms in particular have Yehuda's fingerprints all over them. Other translations in the Siddur were provided by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, a whole team of translators, which is why they're so beautiful and inclusive in their voice. So I'm thinking especially of Marcia, if anybody wants to put some notes into the chat, that'd be amazing. And yes, I love what you pointed out about the intimacy, but also the grandeur of the relationship between the mortal and God. It's very Yom Kippur almost, that Avinu Malkeinu, we want this unbelievably close relationship like parent to child, but we also want the one who's ultimately in charge. And that's a very Shabbos feeling. Yes. Thank you. Who's next?
Ira.
Hi. Yeah. So every time I read this psalm on Friday nights, I'm always struck a little bit by the sort of sudden change in tone and feeling from the first part to the second. This isn't really a question as much as just a sharing that it feels almost like two different psalms to me. It starts with the grandeur and creation, and then it turns a little bit dark and there's an unrest about it. And, so it's
reflective, but regretful, but.
Exactly. I mean, I wonder if sometimes I wonder if these psalms were originally written as one piece or whether they got added.
Great question, and something that I'm not going to say haunts me, but it's something that's in the back of my head all the time. And I think that there's possibility for both here. I am a big fan of the documentary hypothesis, which says that Jewish sacred text is a work of human creation and that it was knitted together over a lot of time, combining a lot of voices. And it could be that these are two distinct voices in the psalm. And it also could be that both of these feelings are absolutely encompassed by one person and one person's journey through their poetic ode. I feel like that too sometimes. And that's what I love about the Psalms, that there's equal possibility for both. And I think that's a beautiful way to enter Shabbat, not ignoring, not crushing that sense of perhaps loss, regret, darkness, but bringing it with you, having it be a holistic part of you. Harold, I think we will take the hands that are up and then we're going to move on to the next song.
Well, then Cantor Nimi is next.
So I just wanted to, can people hear me okay?
Yes.
There's a beautiful midrash that's around the verse Hayom im bekolot tishma'u, today if you would but listen to God's voice, in I think Sanhedrin, where Rabbi, I don't remember which rabbi, I think it was Yehoshua ben something, met the Messiah at the gates of the city of Jerusalem and to ask, when will the master come, referring to God, and the Messiah said, today. And when Yehoshua went back to Elijah and said that the Messiah lied to me, he said the master was coming today and the Messiah didn't come, Elijah said, today, if you would but listen to his voice. And so referring to this particular verse, beautiful midrash, I would encourage folks to go find it and read it.
Yeah, and just think about the implications for what that means for the healing of the world, for the world as it could be instead of the world as it is, but also for the journey that we take to get there. That's one of my favorites. I'm so glad that you said it. And that's one of the reasons why, of all of the Psalm, Cantor Nimi will do more about this, and we've got other cantors in the room who could probably comment. Frequently, the compositions that we sing of this Psalm are for the very opening lines, L'chuna ranana, come let us praise. And then sometimes we jump or we only focus on that Arbaim Shana, 40 years you put up with us. And those are two very distinct feelings, as Ira said. Okay, who was next, Harold?
Dean?
Yeah, quickly. I think the phrase that is actually transitional is "we the flock in your care," so that you have nature in its magnificence. And if you think about, I guess I've been around rural America, but if you think about sheep, or if you think about just observing birds or anything else, they are immersed in nature and understand they must listen and pay attention. And so I think it is our human arrogance that follows. So it's about bringing us back into that relationship where we are small and this is big, and being small isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I think you're exactly right, Dean. What a beautiful turning point in the Psalm to characterize us as part of the natural world. We are the flock in your care, still emphasizing these themes of God's sovereignty. God is the shepherd. God is the one in charge who knows where we're supposed to go and we're supposed to listen. And if you've been around rural America, you know that sheep are not great listeners. They're probably better listeners than humans, but I think this is a spot-on metaphor. Who is next?
Sherry.
So I want to build on something that Judy said in the penultimate line, the threshold of the promised land. Well, the promised land here is Shabbat. So that it makes sense that this be the introductory psalm. And then finally, the comment that Yehuda puts at the end, which is, if we would but listen, so we can enter Shabbat if we are ready to receive it. So that's how it struck me.
Gorgeous. And I love the sense of agency that it lends humanity. Judaism absolutely has strains of thought that are all about predestination, but I would characterize the majority of thinking is that human beings have control. It's not just decided for us, and that our choices really, really matter, even if God holds this position as sovereign, top of the hierarchical chain. And Simon, what I love about that is that, Shabbat is going to come, the sun is going to set, whether or not you want it to. You don't have control over that, but you absolutely do have control over how you enter through this doorway. And what are you bringing with you, and what are you leaving behind? And you could do it on purpose, or you could let those choices rule you and decide you have no say over them, but your decision is still an act of agency. Fabulous. All right.
Linda's psalm.
Rabbi, I have
Wait, Michael. Linda had her hand.
a quick question. What does the word Kabbalat mean? Please translate the word Kabbalat. Thank you.
Receive. Kuf bet lamed, a root that we talked about yesterday. Reception or to take in. And Linda, what was your question?
Well, it's not a question so much as something that struck me as I went through several of my translations, the books of translation like Alter and the Metsuda Tehillim, which should be as close to the original as possible, and then I look at ours and the voice is different. The voice is not ours. The voice is God's, and God is saying in the Metsuda Tehillim, God is saying, "They are people of erring hearts, and they did not know my ways. Therefore I swore in my anger, they shall not enter my resting place." Whereas Yehuda, whom I loved, by the way, we knew him in his other life as an educator. He puts it in the voice of the people, the Israelis, and if we had just listened, I think there's a striking difference in the tone of anger that is reduced by what Yehuda had to say.
All right, Linda, I'm going to share the Hebrew again so we can point out exactly what you have noticed. And remember, I feel very strongly that every single translation is an act of interpretation, and we can try really hard. You know, Alter is like the patron saint of this, to be as close to the Hebrew as possible, but we can't possibly be, right? We aren't in the shoes of the psalmist. And so every decision that we make is still sort of like an agenda. But that's what I love about translation. I think it's a multi-layered art form. So what Linda is pointing out is that much of the psalm, as we said, is in the collective. And then Yehuda keeps that collective voice narration all the way through to the end. But if you look closely at the Hebrew, as Linda did, so if you come down to the Arbaim Shana section, Va'omar Am Toev Levavhem, Va'omar, and I said. So this, all the way down here, is where the narrative voice changes to first person, where God is speaking. And then you notice the Mishbati, the T ending is also the first person possessive. And so these are the Hebrew clues that can show you that the voice has changed. But what an interesting innovation by Yehuda to continue the thread of the collective voice, to take on this responsibility as the children of Israel, rather than God directing this to us. Really, really interesting. Okay, so a couple last things that I want to make sure I point out before we leave this psalm for now is that if you're looking for the God of might, God of right, all of these like very grandiose God sovereignty, look to this line, Ki El Gadol Adonai Umelech Gadol Al Kol HaElohim. Not only do we see Gadol, the root for great or mighty or enormous, and we see Melech, which is the root for ruler or king. Gadol again. God is the greatest God of all of the gods. And what an interesting statement, a recognition that there might be a reader who recognizes other gods, but God, this one, the monotheistic God, is the greatest of all of them. And then if you're looking for, beautiful, beautiful lines of creation language, Asher Beyado, and forward, I love the way Yehuda translated it. Yours are the depth of the earth. Mountain peaks are yours alone. The sea is yours. The dry land was shaped by your hand. This is the very creative force that we're going to see throughout these Psalms. So with that, I am going to move us on to Psalm 96, continuing in the rubric 95 through 99. Here is 96. May I have a Hebrew reader and an English reader for this psalm?
We have Yael Bat Chava ready to read in Hebrew.
Thanks, Yael. Please.
What page? What page?
We're on page 54 in the Siddur itself, and I've got the Hebrew up here for everybody to look at. And the translation is on 55.
שירו לאדוני שיר חדש. שירו לאדוני כל הארץ. שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו. בשרו מיום ליום ישועתו. ספרו בגויים כבודו. בכל העמים נפלאותיו. כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד. נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. כי כל אלוהי העמים אלילים. ואדוני שמיים עשה, הוד והדר לפניו, עוז ותפארת במקדשו. הבו לאדוני משפחות עמים, הבו לאדוני כבוד ועוז. הבו לאדוני כבוד שמו, שאו מנחה ובואו לחצרותיו. השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש, חילו מפניו כל הארץ. אמרו בגויים אדוני מלך, אף תיכון תבל בעל תימות, ידין עמים במישרים. ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירעם הים ומלואו. יעלוז שדי וכל אשר בו, אז ירננו כל עצי יער. לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק, ועמים באמונתו.
Gorgeously read. Thank you, Yael. We have an English reader.
Jim Brule, you have your hand up. Is that to read the psalm? Yes, Jim will do it. And Rabbi, I have a little scan that I can put up if that would be helpful for the people who don't have their
The English?
Yeah.
Sure. Let's do that in a second. I'd love to be able to connect the Hebrew to
Great,
the English
great,
in this
terrific,
way. And
great.
then, yes, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Jim Brule.
Okay. I sing a new song to you, and the earth sings too. I sing, and my song blesses your unsayable name. Day by day announcing the utter presence of things, day by day evoking your glory among the nations, calling forth your miracles among all the peoples. You are each place and each thing, and nowhere and nothing, no praise and all praise, no word and all words. Touch this. For it is beyond what can be seen and known, inconceivable. You of the eyeless heaven, grandeur and majesty surround you who are scored and marked with light. Everyone listen. Recognize this light and this power. Bathe your face in the luminous circle of its named namelessness. Place your body there, making of it a gift. I offer you this life, in the beauty of the dappled world trembling before you, earth's utter presence saying fearlessly aloud among the nations, God alone gives sovereignty, and the world is unshakable. Existence is just. Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth dance, let the sea churn with all of the life that's in it, let the fields burst with plenty, and the trees of the forest brim with dignity. In song to you who comes with justice, who comes with the sweetness of truth.
So beautifully read. I lost myself in your narration. Perfect. So I am going to stop the share of the screen. Does anybody have impressions, thoughts, or questions about this psalm? Remembering that part of our chief work here is how does it fit in terms of the whole rubric? It doesn't just stand by itself, but how is it in relation to the other Shabbat?
Ira has his hand up.
Well, I startlingly, I picked up the Norman Fisher Psalms and realized that this is that. So the English translation that we were reading is actually the Norman Fisher translation or interpretation of the psalm. So I just wanted to share that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Um, Linda Solomon has her hand up. I will also invite everyone, we have 84 people here with us today, that we welcome our long timers and we welcome new timers to chime in also. So Linda, go ahead.
Well, as I'm reading this one, I'm thinking about Rabbi Kleinbaum and how we spoke about the contrasts in each line of the Psalms as we were doing them, and I'm seeing very, very pronounced in this Psalm the contrasts in the line, so that we have things like you are each place and each thing, you and nowhere and nothing. So it just comes home that this is throughout the Psalms that we're going to be seeing these themes as well.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Harold, why don't you share the translation of the psalm?
Okay,
I'll keep my eye on. I can still see while you share who has their hands virtually raised.
Oh,
So I'll call on Ari.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. We raise hands in participants so that everybody gets called on in order.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I believe Ari was next.
Yeah.
And here we go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, so I'm thinking about that same sort of stanza that Linda was talking about, the you are each place and each thing and nowhere and nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then going down to everyone listen. And I think
pause just a second. Harold, could you zoom in on the translation?
Yes, I can.
Little tiny, and that way we can point to Ari's talking about in the
right
translation,
here. Okay.
the second paragraph.
Terrific.
You are each place and each thing. Keep going, Ari.
Yeah, and I think for me at least that stanza, and then even the stanzas following it, I think really sort of emphasize those themes that you were talking about earlier of like awe-filled appreciation. Like I know for me, when I'm thinking about the divine, it is always that like, you're all these things and also I know absolutely nothing about you.
Lovely. Thank you, Ari. Okay, Sarah Sloan, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that if the psalm before this, L'chu Neranena, was a way of easing into Shabbat and setting the space for Shabbat, this could easily be the song of the first day of creation. It's a new song. I sing a new song to you when the earth sings. It's about things being created and things starting. And the second part of the psalm is duplicating the first part. It's recognize this light, which was created in the first part. So this just feels like a very beginning of creation, a beginning of the cycle of Psalms after the introduction from L'chu Neranena.
Nice.
Lovely. Well observed, Sarah. Barbara, I see you next.
So it was the whole last paragraph that just really got to me. Every part of it, the trees are standing with dignity, all of God's creation. But the last two sentences, in song to you who comes with justice, who comes with the sweetness of truth. Boy, do we need that today.
Yeah.
In our world, with our leaders.
I totally agree. And like how incredible that there's this call to action in this beautiful poem of glory and like grandeur of natural themes. And Barbara, you've got good taste, because the asterisk next to let the heavens rejoice in the Hebrew, Yismechu Hashamayim. This is one particular part that we love to lift because it's got its own separate musical compositions for exactly those same reasons. The language is so stirring.
Right.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you.
Marcia.
I just wanted to follow up with what Ira said to call people's attention to the back of the book. So on page 294, but every single page in the book is indexed at the back with the source. And so you would see there the source was for Norman Fisher. And as we go through the rest of the Psalms, you'll see where some were translated by Yehuda, some were translated by Yehuda and Ayelet. So you get just a taste of how these were created.
Exactly. And Marcia, I'm so appreciative that you shared it. Marcia is one of the people who knows a lot about the creation of the Siddur. It was almost like a creation of an entire universe. And so if you have the book itself, Marcia was pointing out page 294 is where you'll see all of the citations for those for the Psalms that we're studying. Okay, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. I noticed at the beginning, I sing a new song to you. And so it's the spokesperson writing this psalm is talking about Adonai. And then when you get to the hinge, which is everyone listen, it's then he's selling Adonai to whoever he's speaking to. Recognize this light. I offer you this life. Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth dance, in a song to you who comes with justice. In other words, it's a big sales pitch to me of Adonai and why it's important to be aware of it.
Yeah, and so Michael, I do want to point out that this is a particular innovation of this translation, which I think is beautiful. If you look in the Hebrew, Shiru Ladonai with that collective U at the end, it's let's all sing a new song to God. So it doesn't have quite the first person narration that the English chose, but I think that your description of a sales pitch is a perfect one. It's trying to prove the greatness of our God, all the attractive qualities. Like, wouldn't you want to be in the flock of the God who created all the earth? I really like the way that you described that.
Thank you.
You have lots of feelings about this psalm. Larry Finkelstein, what's on your mind?
Well, first I want to say that this is a revelation to me. Every Friday night we read this we sing this in Hebrew, and I had no idea what the English was because I never read the English. I was always singing or trying to sing, and anybody who sits near me knows I really can't sing, but I try. So this has just been, I mean, these couple of days have just been wonderful to understand what it is I've been singing. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry.
But second, those in my age cohort may remember the show Godspell from the early 1970s. And one of the breakout songs was Day by Day. And you know, and at that time it was like my favorite. I loved it. But I was always a little troubled by it because how was I as a Jew responding in the way I was to this song, which it was in a play about Jesus, even though it was written by Stephen Schwartz, a Jew from Long Island. But so reading these words and seeing in the context of it, I said, wow, Stephen Schwartz, you knew what you were doing.
Must have studied his Psalms.
I guess he did.
I think that the best lyricists are the ones who go closely to their source text. So I can't promise that Psalms was what Schwartz studied, but I think you see evidence here. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit, making sure to call on some people who haven't spoken yet. I also know Carol wants to speak, but isn't virtually raising a hand. So Carol, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. You know, when he started with I Sing a New Song, it reminded me of Walt Whitman. I sing, you know.
Yes.
It's a very strong comparison, except Whitman sings about himself, you know. I mean, and how beautiful he is. And
yeah, but isn't that too like an explanation of glory of creation?
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is about God, not about, you know, Walt Whitman. But I'm new to the program, and I want to thank Nina Luban for introducing me. And this is the first time I got on, and I'm very pleased with what you're doing. It's wonderful. And you know, in all the years that I've said Lecha Dodi, and I do know Hebrew, and I didn't realize that this was a cluster of songs, a cluster from Tehillim. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 60% of the Siddur is Tehillim.
That's not
it's
the
a
number I would
very
use.
large
If you take
part.
my Lashon Kodesh class, we'll figure out what the
I
exact
think
percentage
so,
is.
you know, and I wonder sometimes if the rabbis were plagiarists or something, you know, they
In Judaism, we've got this great tradition of, it's
by
like Andy
source.
Warhol, you know, great artists steal.
But I really learned something today, and I thank you for that.
I'm so
And I
glad,
hope
Carol.
to
Thank you
come
for
back.
sharing. We're going to focus on the Psalms themselves because we are, you know, regrettably 10 minutes out and still have some music to share. So I'm going to make sure the people who haven't spoken yet get to speak about this song, and we'll probably just go to sing out after that.
Right.
Jamie Beckenstein, how are you this morning?
Okay, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm curious about, so I think the last paragraph is so beautiful. And then the one before this, there was also talk about like the natural world. And I'm curious if that is like specific to, I mean, I know it's in the law of Psalms, but like really specific to the Kabbalah Shabbat Psalms or just kind of everywhere all the time?
So not every psalm has this theme of creative force within it. And remember, I said that there were 3 themes that really define and delineate the psalms that are for Kabbalat Shabbat. So you're right to notice that. Creation and all of these beautiful metaphors and direct references to the majesty of creation, the majesty of God as, you know, creative force and ruler, and just appreciation for taking all of this in. So these are the ones that do it the best, I would say. And that's why they made it to Kabbalat Shabbat. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So Benjamin, I wanted to give you the chance to speak in English. Your Hebrew speaking is so beautiful. What are you thinking about today?
I'm having, this is really a question. I'm having trouble with the concept that it's in this psalm and in the one before, and actually goes all the way back to Shirat Hayam. There are other gods besides God. The definition of that, even though it's supposed to be monotheistic.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand that.
It's troubling, especially when, you know, so many of us have been taught, and it's like in our very bones, the watchword of the Jewish faith is the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the eternal is our God, the eternal is one, only one. And so I wonder, you know, going back to Michael's idea of a sales pitch, if some of this is couched in a language that's trying to appeal to the surrounding time and place when people did believe in other gods, and they thought that the best sales pitch was one that was like, well, of all the other gods, God is the greatest God. You do see, you know, a many faceted approach to God that does sort of trade on ancient Near Eastern ideas of different gods, but this one God of Israel encompasses all of them. This is possibly one of the reasons why God has so many names, because they might have been completely different gods at one point that were all rolled into one with this fairly original monotheistic concept. And it shows up in more places than just these Psalms, Benjamin, you're right. So that is my hypothesis, but I will look more into it. It's a really interesting thread of discussion. Stephen Deem, thank you.
Hi there, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm really struck by the English translation of personifying the objects, like earth dances, the seas churn. And I'm assuming that it really is probably the same in the Hebrew or close enough to it. And I think it's just such a beautiful technique to really look at the divine when the divine looks at a tree, not as an inanimate object, but as a thing of life, and really separates us to make.
Good job, Jeff. Good job.
The divine.
Good job.
So I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, and this actually does go back to Benjamin's question that, you know, there is this whole, a friend of mine wrote a thesis on this, a whole undercurrent in Jewish tradition of writing about the goddess Ashura, who is sort of like embodied in a tree, and the aspects of that were brought into eventually monotheistic appreciation of God, but were very much borrowed from everybody who thinks that trees are incredible creations, forces of life. All right, Sue. Sue, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, okay, I just had to.
There you are.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask about, the word vagoyim that I heard in the Hebrew, which I cringe at every time I hear, because I assume it's the va is like a prefix and it's about the goyim.
Exactly, vav before a word means and.
Okay, and so where is it in the translation? Is it among the nations, or is it all the people, or what? And is that where it is?
Yeah, so goy really means nation, and am really means people. So if you're looking in the third line of the Hebrew sapru vagoyim, that's the nations, and then if you jump to the next column, bechol ha'amim niflotam, is all the peoples. And I know that we get this cringe-worthy feeling when we hear the word goy because it comes with a negative connotation, especially in Ashkenazi diasporic Hebrew, that anybody of another nation is not to be trusted. That isn't the original connotation of the word. Sometimes it is used with a negative connotation. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't exist in biblical text. However, it's also just an idea that there were nation states, there were other people who were also faiths, who were also collectively bound to one another. And I always think of the phrase, that we are to be a light to the nations. So it kind of, what you bring to it is what it means, as with so much in any language.
And it doesn't, here it's just referring to nations as opposed to, I think isn't it the Aleinu prayer, which says,
that one's pretty pointed and specific. You know how I feel about that prayer.
Version.
And thank goodness for Jack Greenberg, who gave us such a beautiful translation in the Siddur that's completely innovative. So I'm going to pause right now, but if you have other thoughts and reflections on this psalm, please feel free to put them into the chat. I've been seeing such beautiful, beautiful observations and connections being made, especially to music, which was one of the things that I really appreciate about this class, the vast musical songbook that is within it. When we get together tomorrow, we are going to continue. We'll do 97, 98, maybe 99. And we will discuss how to make sure that we cover all of the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat and that we still have time for music, which is so precious. So speaking of music, Cantor Nimi, if you want to
I actually am going to be having to run to another meeting that I have in 3 minutes, but Harold's going to play a recording actually of the piece that I offered at the beginning, but you'll get to hear the composer's voice, which I think is actually very nice because Yael Tai has a beautiful voice. And she also set the third verse of the psalm as well. So I actually have to run, but I hope you all enjoy.
And just a few quick housekeeping things before we go. Tomorrow we will also be running to 11. I would repeat that if you're not talking, please stay on mute. It is distracting. I put everything that was mentioned today is already on our Facebook page, has a link to our Amazon list. We know that some people don't buy off of Amazon, but it is the easiest way for me to refer you to the material. So the decoding Hebrew phonetically is already on our Facebook page. And your TA may actually have the time to do some scans of the other Psalms that we're going to be reading from the other books. We will not be, if I'm correct, Rabbi, we will not be studying the other translations, but since many of us have the other books and are used to it, that we can also look at the translations of these other Psalms in other sources to see how they differ from.
You can see where we borrowed from Fisher, and if you look to the back of our Siddur, you'll know exactly who are the architects of each of the translations of the Psalms under Yehuda and many people's expert guidance.
And so we will end with, as Cantor Nimi suggested to us, Nava Tehillah themselves singing their L'chu Neranenah. Wow.
Thank
Nothing-
you, everybody. And I mean, how extraordinary to see that we can hear within this one song of the psalm, raucous, outlandish joy and deeply contemplative and meditative. Can't wait to see what we listen to tomorrow.
Yes. So if there's anyone, I know we have some new people. If anyone wants a little orientation on our translations and things, feel free to, or using the chat, feel free to stay. We will let the rabbi go with a big round of applause for a fascinating class. Oh my God, this is so great. And anyone who has any questions, just stick around. Thank you so much, everybody. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
All right. Was there anyone who has any questions about how, who's new about how this class works, about the translation we're mentioning, about raising your hand in chat, or anything like that?
Harold, it's Michelle Zalkin. Could you
Hi,
just give me
Michelle.